Cool.
Yeah.
Let me get the recording going. Oh, so
Uh,
it did. It seems like I changed the setting on Zoom to allow join before host, and it seems like that probably let people in when I did that. I was like still in my
well,
last meeting, and I saw Rob's note and was like, oh, I think I can check a box.
yeah.
So
Once you check that box, suddenly we all joined, and I was like,
awesome.
"Where's Matt?" I was
Yep.
like,
Good. Good. My
uh,
Zoom foo is improving. I know where to find the box to let people in. So
"If you
yeah,
can
so that
find a
shouldn't be a problem.
way,
It should just auto open now. So
I need to figure out how to supply a Zoom URL directly to the Zoom client because the way that I'm using Zoom on Ubuntu, if I click on a Zoom link in Firefox, they'll be like, open this in Zoom. I hit OK, and nothing happens.
that's weird.
So I end up having to kind of manually figure out like what the URL, like what's encoded in the URL and that kind of thing.
For me, you
Yeah.
just have to do it.
No, it doesn't work at all for me because both Firefox and Zoom are running inside the Ubuntu container technology, application container
Oh,
technology,
okay.
which is called Snap. And Snap has a lot of problems. Honestly, it has a lot of rough edges.
Well, for me, first when I click it, it opens a Zoom app. It doesn't bring across the actual meeting. But then if I go back to the browser or Slack and click it again while Zoom is open, then it works.
Yeah, it doesn't work for me.
I just normally copy the URL and then put in the passcode. That works fine.
I just click the link.
Yeah, I have to do that on my desktop system because I can't get to Slack on a desktop. But that system died last week, so I'm on my iPad 100% now.
New world.
You look very tired. What happened?
Who, me?
Yeah, you.
Well, been a busy week, I guess.
Week, I see. That's why. Okay.
Yeah, I walked back from Kasai yesterday because I had to drop off, or yesterday? Was that? Yeah, yesterday. I dropped off the SafeCast car for Shotcan and realized that I didn't really want to take a train, so I just walked home and it was a ways.
Exercise.
What did they expect?
Anyway, shall we get on with it?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Happy birthday.
Hey, thanks.
There we go.
Cool. So there's the usual screen share. I think the CSV stuff is done at this point. Nick jumped in there, and that was a big help. So seems like this is wrapped up. So thanks, Nick. Because Nick found another export that did have what we needed, which is great.
That's great.
Cool. I've still been poking away at the Docker container setup. The last thing I wanted to do was the certs that I talked about. I could potentially do this later, but I don't know. I was sort of on a roll, so I figured go ahead and do it.
I mean, it'll be a really nice thing to be able to do.
Yeah, just to let folks know what I'm up to there. I think, did I push this already? No, I didn't push it yet, so let me load it up. But I think I've got it working. I've just got to get it all pushed and like make sure I can run it. Let me move this up here. So basically what I've got going is a new GitHub action called obtain certificate. That what it does is it
pick up.
yeah, it basically it lets you specify a set of domains. And then it runs this app called Lego, which I didn't even find until like 2 weeks ago, but it's kind of cool. It's basically an app that it knows how to talk to Let's Encrypt and Route 53. And so basically all you have to do is call Lego with DNS Route 53 and the list of domains. So it's basically just a little batch script. Yeah, sorry?
It's like AutoCert bot for it. AutoCert has a bot for it and shell script for it.
Yeah. And so the nice part about this one is it knows how to talk to Route 53, so it handles the challenge and everything for you. So yeah, so basically what this does is it pulls down a directory from S3. It runs either the renew or the run if it's a new cert, and then Lego will take care of doing all the Let's Encrypt challenge and everything like that. It dumps the certs and the keys into the local directory, and then I use AWS Sync to put that directory back to S3. And then so that seems to be working. I need to get it all committed. And then the other half of that is like for any app that needs a Let's Encrypt cert, would be to give it like a Beanstalk extension file that knows to go to S3 and grab the cert before it boots up the service. So, and at that point, we should have certs completely, uncoupled from whether or not we have a load balancer.
So it's neat, but I thought that the typical way of using Let's Encrypt was to run a daemon on the reverse proxy.
You can, but then there's a question of like which instance runs it and is it accessible yet or not. And also, I don't think you can do that with you can't do that with a wildcard as well. Like it would have to have like one fixed.
Wildcards are deprecated. You should never be using wildcard. I mean, that's the whole point of Let's Encrypt, is that you don't use wildcards because you can, create a certificate for every DNS entry you have.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we could go that way as well. So that's an option. This seems to work. So I guess in order to do that, we would have to probably, we could set up something on each instance that calls Let's Encrypt. And then we would still need a way, I think, to distribute like the user key to every instance. So I could put just the user registration key for Let's Encrypt.
Right.
And then download that.
But
yeah,
I mean,
that could work.
I mean, it kind of comes into it segues into my next question which is, do we have some tickets, or do we have an awareness that, first of all, let me take a step back. Angela, can you please explain to me what this opportunity project thing is that I spent last weekend working? Because I was added to this channel last week and I've never heard anything about what this is, or what the goal is, or who's working on it, or why we're deploying a Python script that has big warnings at the top that says do not use this in production when I started up. So
did you see this? Oh wait, no, that's yeah. This isn't the command mouse demo. Where is it? It was, I thought I uploaded it here. Where did the one? Oh, that's right. It's like unlisted, and then I posted it to this channel. I don't know where YouTube shows me those. But there was a video that Angela sent that might help explain it, but she could probably give you the quick version as well.
I can give you the quick version.
Do we have anything in writing?
I'm sorry?
Sorry. Yeah, I'll take the quick version.
Okay. So the Opportunity Project was something that we joined in, I think, June. And at that time, I posted about it in a couple different places. I know I posted about it in general, but I think I may have posted about it in API. I'm not sure. But in any event, the Opportunity Project, we were put in contact with the US Census Bureau, who are running these kind of, they're kind of like accelerator innovation hub projects that they do every year. And this year they are doing like 3 different versions, one on air quality, and one on recycling, and one on, I believe, oceans. So we were, it was like, hey, Safecast, would you participate in the air quality one? And from their point of view, they're looking at can any of the data sets that are, either from the US DOT, the Department of Transportation, the US EPA, the Census Bureau, a variety of other health organizations within the US government, can any of those use that data in combination with data that is, it's kind of like, can you amplify, right? And so their idea was, it's going to be great because people who are doing data projects, they will be perhaps making a new product, and then that new product would be helping get other data from that the US government has already compiled out there. So it's a 12-week project. I originally tried to, like I floated it to see if anybody was available within this group, and didn't really get a bite. But also, like, I didn't show up and try to over explain it either. It was just like, things are moving fast. I said, we don't have anybody in our group, meaning you all, that that I could not ask for our internal teams who are already working on things to be building out another product. But they said, why don't we give you a group of people that would work on it? And I'm looking at it as like, well, that's interesting, because maybe these people would be interested in staying with Safecast and being technologists and devs with Safecast. So I got a group of mostly graduates from this program at Columbia, and they mostly are data scientists. And of them, most of them did not work out. And Jolene was the only person who stuck with it.
Nice.
And so my objective with this whole thing was that I had wanted to and had been asking about getting some way to get data to be more accessible on our platform. And I'd been talking to this internally, both with Nick and with Peter and with, like, different people. And I didn't really get any traction. I thought that this would be a way to, like, do a very quick and dirty, let's see what it would be like to get a data visualization that somebody else could do. And the goal of, if you read the top of this, the goal of it is to create a data visualization that you are aware of what you're doing. Like, I would like to do this thing. I'm creating a data visualization that I understand to be, like, I'm articulating it verbally and I'm seeing the results of it. Because what I've noticed in looking at a bunch of other projects is that you can get a dashboard, or you can make a map look a lot of different ways, and you can kind of make it look pretty, but you don't really understand what you're getting at unless you have a certain amount of data literacy. And so the idea was to create something that would help improve data literacy by kind of pointing that out. So it turns out that all of the data sets that we were offered were they weren't helpful, because they were like a different time spectrum, or they're really modified data, or like there's all sorts of ways that it would be apples and oranges to put them next to each other. So if you look at the other upper right hand corner, she has this, like, here's a relevant data set, and then that kind of goes out to the EPA to satisfy to the National Emissions Inventory, to satisfy their goal of having their data set represented. But I wanted to be very careful about putting data sets that don't really match well with our data set. So they're really interested in our data set as being an open data set. They're very supportive of us, but I didn't find that, like, one of the goals that I had was to get behind this, so that we wouldn't, that, for instance, I was never successful in, say, getting to the data. They would say, why don't you just scrape it off this page? Like, why don't you just get whatever you need from here? And I was saying, like, no, I'd rather, get the data from wherever the data comes from, so that we could use it, make it more usable. But I was never able to do that, because I was talking to two high level people. It was one of the reasons why we weren't able to use those data sets. But there were a couple other things going on. Like, it's a lot longer than that. I don't want to, over explain, but that's what the project was meant to be, and that's who Jolene was. So Jolene's a volunteer, and she's looking at it as this would be a mini project that would be for use for the LA Public Librarians, to be able to kind of look at their monitors, and they would be the first users of it. But then ultimately, we could have some sort of way for people to create visualizations, gain data literacy, interact with our data more, but also not create like bunk.
So you say was, is this like, is the program now complete? I mean, she's
so
on a volunteer basis.
She has, the program is considered to be complete as of her presentation this Monday.
So that was a presentation that there was some sort of deadline I had the impression was happening for.
Exactly.
Yeah, it would be nice
that was what you were helping with.
You know, if I had been asked further in advance or just had this explained to me, I could have helped deploy this without having to scramble at the last minute. And I feel like this wasn't, like, where's the collaboration? Like, we're a very small organization, and yet there's these things going on, these conversations that don't happen in the open. So.
Yeah, and part of that might came down to, it was like Jolene said, "Oh, we might need to deploy this again." Like, to be quite frank, I didn't even do the first deployment until Rob said he was having trouble getting it set up, and I was like, "Well, I was able to get it set up, so let me just put it somewhere so that way Rob can take a look at it." And that's how this was deployed. So, and I don't even know if this ended up getting used in the presentation at all. So maybe, you know, oh, did? Okay, good. So
yeah.
So your scramble was not for naught there.
Yeah, no, it was like, for her, that was everything, right? Yeah. Because so Andrew, I gotta say, I apologize. I like, the very thing that I was trying to avoid is the thing that you're feeling, and I feel like I tried to mention it and talk about it and be open about it. It was an open channel. I invited people, but I didn't really, the reason that I didn't come here and discuss it a lot was because my understanding was that you, Matt, Rob, Jam, that people already had their hands full, and that this would be more like a burden. Like, don't ask for something when their hands are full already. So I wasn't really, you know, it's like short discussion, but I'm not gonna try to involve you too much. But I did actually ask people to join the Opportunity Project a lot earlier. So I'm sorry that,
you know, if we're going to run something on the infrastructure, then we need to know that what we're going to have to run, right? That's, you know, I'm not going to sit here and code what is being coded here. That's not in my area of expertise. I'm not a data scientist, but if you're going to run something, you know, it happens to be lucky. One, of course, that Matt was already working on stuff and was able to jump in and help with this. And two, I had intentionally blocked out last weekend to work on SafeCast stuff for other reasons, just not this. So
this got this ended up eating into the thing that you had intended to do.
Right, but it's all a matter of planning based on what I think needs to happen next. And actually, coincidentally, I mean, what I work on for SafeCast is deploying stuff. You know,
that's a good exercise,
so.
No?
Not really, no, because I'm trying to get it so that we can deploy stuff more reliably without having to put fires out at the last minute. So.
I apologize. I take your critique. I think part of the reason that I've been coming to these meetings, in addition to them being at a more manageable time for me, is to kind of work in some of the things, like understand what's going on with the group, but also to, you know, where it touches other things that I'm trying to promote, to identify that and make sure that we don't have a glitch like this again. So
on a related note, something right now, but sometime in the near future, we need an update on the library project, because I know about it, but I don't know that anybody else, I think it's not well publicized cameras inside SafeCast.
Wait, there's a library project?
This is the library project. Yeah. The thing that we were
Yeah.
just talking about.
So
I mean, this is what I'm getting at. Like, you can't just like, you can't build products without considering from the beginning how they're going to be run, how they're going to be maintained. And that's not the same as building the product. It's also just as important. So, yeah.
There's also the Olympics project, but that kind of got postponed.
A little bit.
But there is, and Joe, I think you mentioned this last week, that probably it's worth it to have some early discussion about what we want to do, if anything, for the anniversary. Because
Right.
we're coming up on 10 years.
2 weeks ago.
And
Yep.
yeah, so that's getting pretty close. And so I have no idea, you know, it's tricky, right? Because you basically have, you know, folks like Andrew and myself who help out a little bit. But as far as like, we don't have the time to invest in things like, you know, kind of, I'm trying to think of a good way to say this, but like company direction, you know, like creative direction for SafeCast as a whole. You know, we really rely on folks like Sean or
Well, it
you know.
really is a herd of cats in that regard.
Yeah. So if there's anything you want to do, now is a great time to start thinking about that and talking about that, so that we can hopefully not get as surprised when the 10-year anniversary comes around. So.
well, actually, we are talking about what can happen for that. I think I can talk a little bit about the library project if you want. I don't want to, I think there's other things to discuss. Andrew, I'm happy to meet with you and tell you all sorts of things that are going on with that project and how this works with that project, and how everything that I've been working on for a couple of years works for air quality and different things that I'm trying to promote on that project. So I'm happy to do that. I'm not trying to be remote at all.
Yeah, it'd be good to hear
I'm
more.
sorry
I think
about that.
it's
Yeah.
sort of the.
Can I quickly cut in? Because Joe was mentioning about the sensors being used all over, and they're not registering anything for the air quality smoke from the fires. I mean, I was very surprised to see that.
Well,
Okay, Joe
anything
explain
is
me.
different, right? It's just a matter of understanding what it's reading, right?
It's
The
a big
sensors don't-
discussion I wanted to bring up in this meeting. I mean, it's not, Rob's a little bit oversimplifying that it's not that no data comes up. And it goes back a couple of weeks when people are talking about purple air and saying they have these correction factors to try and compensate for the difference between what they see, and that they think that they're vastly underestimating the air quality. And there's a big disparity between purple air readings and those from government sources. And this is all part of that. It has to do with the fact that the sensors can't see things below about 0.5 microns, and smoke is generally about 0.2 microns.
Ooh.
I've been beating it like a little distant drum for about 4 years.
I mean, do sensors exist commercially at an affordable price that solve this problem?
With the caveat of affordable price being, you know, under $10,000, or the cheapest one I know of is about $6,000. I have had an idea of something else, and actually I was thinking about following that up with, actually I was going to take it to Open Water and see if they were interested in helping develop a sensor.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I'd say
they're kind of,
that's the first problem is, can we even detect it? And it sounds like at the moment, no.
very elementary part.
Yeah.
well, yeah, we do
Well,
detect it. It's just
yeah.
that the correlation between the data we get and the world reality is not great. Okay,
Mhm.
because you get to a certain density, you know, anything can see it. I mean, your nose will smell it,
Yeah.
and enough smoke in the air, our sensors are going to see it. But you can't calibrate for it because it's below the size of the sensitivity. In fact, there's specifically an electronic filter in the sensors to take out this stuff that looks like noise, because it's too small it just causes a very small amount of scattering, and the diode sees a little bit of noise, but it's very difficult to pull out of the noise.
Gotcha. So we just don't
Enough
have really
noise-
effective sensor for smoke.
Enough noise eventually looks like a signal, but it's really hard to calibrate on that stuff and be confident of what it's doing.
We need a nose.
Well,
there are electronic noses that could be applied here, things that actually can smell organic material like smoke,
and
and
you
they
get
do
one
a
of those from
chemical
China
reaction.
for like $15. I mean,
The biggest
I bought a
difficulty with
VOC
those is
sensor from my dad for
they
$15.
deplete right away. They work for many hours or several
Mhm.
hours or even dozens of hours, but not for thousands of hours like we would like to use.
Yeah.
Well, the point is, though, if it does indicate something like a blue air sensor might or such. If you're outside, it's easy to perceive a haze in the air because you can see a long distance, or not. Like I've been trapped in a smoke cloud before. I was out sailing once actually, and but if you're indoors, you might have that same air quality, but might not be able to see it. But even a blue air sensor might be able to pick up on that change, that increase in PM 2.5.
Well, there was some work with the runway visual range sensors, which are typically a light source and a sensor separated by 1 meter. And something like that is large because it's got to have a 1 meter space in it. But there are ways to fold that up, and there are possibilities of sensors. But one of the things that Safecast has consistently decided as policy is not to develop our own technology. We're not going to develop mirrors.
Not our own sensors, yeah.
Right. So we develop systems, and there isn't anything really purchasable out there that's better than what we're using right now despite the demand, lots of demand.
I mean, it seems like there is some kind of a PM 2.5 reaction going on here. It's just that, like, even just looking at the graph that I have on the screen right now, you can
sure
you can see an upward trend.
It's noise. If there's enough noise in the small channels, it's got a Gaussian distribution. It's going to, the edge of it going to bleed over into the 10 micron range if it gets big enough. And there's more than smoke downwind of a fire. There's dust.
There's particulate matter for sure too.
Right. And nobody's really talking much about aggregate particles. The smoke particles are sticky, and they tend to the larger particles are really multiple particles that have stuck together. And depending on conditions, that happens more or less. So there are things to do. What's not available is a predictable model of, okay, when this reads X, it means, there's this much density, because we want to read out in micrograms per, cubic centimeter of air, or some quantity. And that's very difficult to do. What people really want is, how many emergency room admissions can we expect? How many asthma attacks can we expect? And that's even another step away.
Another layer removed. You have to think about any architecture you design, you have to put in terms of layers. And we were talking a little bit about this last week or the week before, where it's like you have to collect data, and you have to collect the raw data and indicate where you got that raw data from, what kind of sensors were used, that kind of thing. Then you can start transforming that data into these interpretive things, and that requires different specialists and different models and the ability to transform that raw data according to some sort of normalization.
At this point, we have a pretty good confidence that there's a direct correlation between particulates and pollutants in the air and adverse health events. But the actual relationship and the different parameters of that is something we as a society, not Safecast, are still trying to sort out. The best thing we can do for that is to collect a lot of data so we can correlate it later. This is the sort of basis of the Safecast Air Quality Project, is that, well, we don't know, we can't do this. Well, you have to start somewhere. So start gathering data, and it'll either correlate or it won't, but you won't know until you have the data and need it widespread and over time. So.
Yep. Yeah, makes sense.
And
well, at least we have that.
Well, the Safecast Air Quality Project, we all understand the goals. I think the issue is getting the proper infrastructure in place. And that involves everything from the hardware being built to having the proper data collection infrastructure in place.
Well, we started building some other sensors a couple years ago that included sulfur dioxide and carbon monoxide and those kinds of things. And they turned out to be more problematic. And so the decision was made to focus on particulate matter just because the sensors were mature and seemed like they would last for months to years. So that was why we were focusing on particulate matter. And it's the same reason that Purple Air and other people are looking at the same factors, because you've got a sensor that measures something. The data is kind of clear. You can get a spectrum from it, and let's correlate that and see if it works.
No,
it may
that's the fine part. I'm talking about the data collection infrastructure, is in where that data is collected, how we collect it, how we store it. How it becomes available to projects like this library project.
Well, I don't have a good answer for what we should be doing in the database. Right now, most of our data, even our air quality data, is channelized. I mean, all we do is record the density of 2.5 mostly. That's what we mostly display. But there's actually like 140 channels of size spectrum that comes from at least from the AlphaSense OPC sensor. The Plantower has fewer channels, but still, I think we're only storing 3. And I don't know if that's a limitation of the database or the API, or I'm not quite sure why that's why we can't keep all the data.
Yeah, I'm happy to accept more.
To do with the source code in the
device itself,
Solarcast, Nano, or the AirNode. If you see it, Ray picks only a certain stream of data from the sensors and then sends it. So if it's available, he should be able to pick it up, or we should be able to modify the code and pick up more channels.
Part of that is historical. He was trying to get something. The purpose of the Solarcast was to try and qualify the OPC versus the PMS, the Plantower versus the AlphaSense. And so he aggregated that into correlatable channels so we could compare them, apples to apples, both sensors to them. Now that we've made that decision and we've abandoned the AlphaSense and going only with the Plantower, now a different thought should be done as to what data is sent. But we've kind of this legacy. So it's not clear how we should move or what we should do differently.
We should, first of all, so let me be clear. I obviously I care about the data that we're collecting, but to me, like, my personal interest is in having the infrastructure that is scalable and reliable enough to collect that volume of data. If there are 100 channels of data to collect, to have the back-end infrastructure available to handle that, and next time somebody releases a new sensor to collect that data as well.
Right. Do we genericize it enough that we have just a completely generic data ingest system, or do we customize it for each sensor as it comes along?
Well, it's even more fundamental than that. That's a huge volume of data to collect, and it's a matter of having the systems in place that can handle that kind of stuff, which is like what I'm getting at fundamentally. And then it's like, yeah, shoot, we can collect whatever we want, and then we can actually start talking about these questions and put these data scientists who it seems like we have plenty of data scientists who are willing to put in at least temporary tours of duty, so to speak, and put them on like the best quality data available openly. But fundamentally, there's fundamentals that have to be there first.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, a lot of that's above my head. I pay attention to those, but I listen. I've heard. We've seen a couple of proposals over the last 3 or 4 years as to how we might expand so that we can collect humidity and particulate and all the other things that random sensors we haven't even invented or seen yet can be integrated. And all I can do is sort of nod and say, "Well, it sounds good to me," but it's really over my head, and we have to listen to people like you to for that kind of design.
Basically, with the JSON structure we have now in place, we can send anything, can't we? I mean, that's my assumption.
So long as there's not conflicts, it's open. We should probably define.
My point is, you guys seem to be, it's like once you hit that API where you put the data in, that's where your thinking is stopping. And it's right now, like our API falls over in a strong breeze. And, you know, based on things like that are real-time site and that kind of thing.
I agree, Andrew. I'm just not thinking about the API itself. I'm just thinking getting the data into ingest.
Yeah.
And once we have ingest, we should build something on top of that. I mean, the API was put together quickly, I think, and not thought of for the long term. So,
well, this is like our third API.
That's true. So we need the 4th or the 5th or the 6th. So we have to plan for that. I mean,
and the one that falls over is the second one. I mean, let's be clear, right?
Yes,
like, I don't have a lot of concerns around the ingest stability. Accessibility is kind of another story. And that's why I opened up, where is it? This one, to try to talk a little bit more about how we can make that data more accessible.
That's a good one.
Yeah, like, you know, you can send as much as you want. I'm happy to turn up the knobs. Anyway, we're about to drop, so good thoughts all around, and hopefully we can take it up more on Slack.
And you and a nice birthday still. Huh? I hope you get some nice dinner, something like that.
Thanks.
Happy birthday, Matt.
Thanks. All right, talk to y'all soon.
Thanks.
Bye bye.